And the other trend, and I'm curious if any of you have been talking about this or hear people talking about this, is spirituality. A small but growing population identifies as spiritual but not religious. And that could mean many different things. Everybody defines it differently. And most people don't actually have a definition for it when they say they're spiritual, from my experience. But it's just this term that, at least for me at school, like keeps popping up. And people might say, like, well, I don't want to affiliate with an organized religion, but I'm spiritual. So it's hard to say what it means, but it's small but growing. Yeah. Okay. So the Claremont Colleges. I surveyed a sample of the population, and I got, in total, there are 5 Claremont colleges, and there are about, I think, like 6,500 students, and I got over 650 responses that I used, so I think 674. So about 10%, which is great. And I'm going to argue that it's representative of the full population, so I might say population at times and sample at times, but I'm just giving the data from my sample. Okay, so results time. I have a lot of different graphs and tables from what I found, and then I'm going to go over sort of maybe why we're seeing some of these things. But if you have any questions or want to know like what the survey question means that I'm showing or what the graph means, just raise your hand whenever. And I'd also love to talk about this after, because definitely can't get through the whole results section in this amount of time, because there's a lot of stuff to look at. But please just shoot your hand up if you have a question. So you're not expected to be able to necessarily see like how big each of these sections of the pie are, but this just shows the full spectrum of religious affiliation. So the first big thing to notice is that almost half of the samples chose the none or no religion option, which is a lot bigger than the general US population. And I think the Pew Religious Landscape Survey most recently found that 22% of the population, up from 16% in 2007, 22% in 2014, chose the no religion option. So this is more than half that size. And also the Jewish population is a lot larger than the national population, so that also says something about the makeup of the student body.
Question.
Yeah.
For in the other, did a significant number of people that chose other say something like, I'm Jewish culturally but not religious?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I made it difficult for people to make it easier for data analysis by not letting them choose multiple. So I just wanted to know, like, if I was going to be strict like the national surveys are and say you can only choose one, which is really not accurate for a lot of people, I was just asking, like, which would you choose? Haha, you have to choose. So I did get some people writing things in like culturally Jewish, or like writing in like, I'm this and this. I'm like, my mom's this, my dad's this, and they'd rather choose the other. I also got some people writing in humanist or some sort of like spirituality as well. Yeah?
Yeah, did you say this was among students or among the overall?
Students, yep. This is students at the Claremont Colleges, pretty evenly distributed at the schools and different years of study and areas of study as well.
Did you look for correlations between areas of study and their ethnicity?
Yes, actually, I don't know if that's one that I tested, but there are a lot of different like patterns like that. Like, what year are you in college? Does that mean you were more religious or less religious? Really, this is way too big of a survey for a thesis, I realized, too late in the game. So there are so many things that I want to look at like that. But because there are a lot of different patterns that we can potentially find here. This is the same listing, but just with the percentages. So if you want the specifics later, you can check it out. Also, just before I forget, if you Google the name of the thesis, liberal arts religion and irreligion, a cross-sectional analysis of, probably that's enough actually with my name. It's available online, the full thesis, so I have like all the graphs and tables there, so if you want to check it out, you can download it online. And then it says how many downloads I get, so feel free to do that. That's exciting. Open access research. This is just a different way that I represented it to see what the different groups looked like. So I combined the other Christian groups, not including Catholic. I'm sort of just going to speed through this, but raise your hand if you want to stop and look at something for longer, and we can always go back. This is with all the Christian groups together. So the none, no religion still is very large. Okay, so this, I asked a couple questions where I let the respondent define for themselves, and they didn't have to write this out. This was just, they could define for themselves what religious means to them. So everybody could have a different definition of that in their head, but I didn't specify. I just asked if they consider themselves religious. And 58% not religious at all. That's a lot of non-religious people. And that also means that there are some students who identified, they affiliated with a religion, but say they're not religious at all. So they still take that label. So that could be the cultural Jewish students maybe. I'd probably, was trying to decide whether I would choose none or Jewish, because I'm also Jewish, and I don't know which one I'd want to count in more, but that would be me. I might say Jewish, but then not religious at all, if it's more of like a cultural thing or a family thing. So lots of interesting overlap. So the same question about spirituality, and once again, everybody has a different definition for that. A lot more students consider themselves spiritual than religious. So I'll just go back for a second here. Lots of non-religious folks, and then a lot more moderately and slightly spiritual students. So that shows that the trend that's sort of being observed in the US is like really coming through in this student sample. And yeah, so that's, and just in my experience, and I know in some of your experiences, it's also coming through because everybody's talking about how they're spiritual. Okay, the secular labels. So I asked this question of everyone, so that even if you identified with a religion, you could choose a secular label. And you could choose all three of those or none. So it's not, there are people who chose agnostic, atheist, and humanist. But those numbers are a whole lot higher than the national average, which is something like under 5% for atheist and agnostic separately. Yeah.
The national average, is that based on similar surveys where it allowed people to still identify as, say, Christian but humanist?
Some yes and some no.
Because my guess is if you have to force someone, between choosing humanist and Christian, there's a lot of people that would choose Christian, even if they really don't actually participate.
Right.
They feel safer with that label. So.
Yeah, that's true. And one issue with some surveys is that there's this forced choice between religious affiliation and belief. So you only get to say you're agnostic or atheist if you first say that you don't affiliate with a religion. And then only that subgroup is asked, so would you consider yourself agnostic, atheist, or neither? Which means that there are a lot of agnostics out there and atheists out there who aren't getting counted. So I think it's the Pew that asks something like that, where there's a forced choice. And the general social survey, I think, was the one with data where there wasn't a forced choice. But I have to reread my lit review to remember that. But yeah, so I tried to give everyone those options. Okay, this was the list of beliefs that I asked about. Students could choose yes, I believe, no, I don't, or don't know, not sure. And I was surprised. Well, what do you guys think? Does this seem like, is there anything surprising, or are you thinking like this makes sense? Obviously your schools might be very different, but
I think it is interesting how close belief in ghosts and belief in hell.
yeah.
Find a correlation in those?
I haven't looked.
Okay.
I haven't tested. That's a good question.
Believe in ghosts, more likely to believe in hell, or vice versa.
Yeah, and and I looked at some differences across demographics that I probably won't get to today, but it's all in the thesis. As far as like gender, I used sex assigned at birth for this just because I needed like the male, female, two groups, and there were some slight differences for gender, but nothing like in the U.S. overall, and just in general, women tend to be more religious than men, and on campus that was not the case. Yeah.
I guess on that point about the ghosts and the hell thing, if there is a correlation, it just seems weird. Do these people think you can be in two places at once after you die?
Oh, that's a good point.
Like, I think a lot of people, they think of hell differently than the classical Christian definition, because in Christianity, it's if you don't go to heaven, you go to hell. But in a lot of other traditions, hell or Tartarus or whatever is reserved for the super bad. And so you could not go to heaven, not go to hell, and become a ghost. So I think there's a lot of people that think that.
And this is why we need qualitative research as well as quantitative, because you need an in-depth interview to get at that information. Yep, one more question, and then I'm thinking maybe I'll just try and show you guys more graphs, and then I'd love to like open it up to discussion after. Yeah.
It's not specific to this graph.
Oh, that's fine.
Is the data available for further analysis?
Yes. I haven't figured out yet in what way I can make it available for other people to analyze, but right now I still have access to it. As long as I can keep that student account, I still have the data, because there's a lot of like analysis that can be done on this. So I'm hoping to maybe, I don't know if that's something that could be public or at least for other students at the Claremont Colleges potentially, but yeah, good question, because I sure can't do all this data analysis. So this is the question about religious practices. So I asked about attendance at religious services and then participation in other religious things, activities, events, for people who might go to Bible study but not go to a religious service, just to get an idea of that. And so if we're sort of averaging out those two, about half of the sample never participate or never practice their religion in this way, which is a very large portion of the group. And again, a lot of this changes. I don't know if I included the question in this presentation, but I also asked about whether you participate more or less at home or at school, because being at a residential college where everybody's living on campus totally changes things. So someone might go to church every week with their family at home, but never go to church at school, because the parents aren't around. So there are a lot of differences, and a good percentage of people said that they practice differently at home versus at school. So a small percentage, but 13%, not insignificant, are members of religious groups on campus. I was a little worried that SSA would pop into some people's minds, like if you're affiliated with a humanist group, does that count as a religious group? But I asked the people what they thought, and I ended up just going with this and not specifying, but assuming that something with secular in the name wouldn't be considered a religious group, hopefully. So then this is attendance at religious group activities or services, and almost 70% never do, but more students participate than affiliate with the groups. Like, I don't know if I would say I affiliate with Hillel on campus, but I definitely would go to a Hillel event every now and then. So I would fit in one of those as well. So that makes sense. So, okay, as we're wrapping up here, the analysis, the discussion section of this thesis is why are the results so secular? And this spirituality trend, why is that coming through in this population so strongly? And it all comes back, I argue, to the demographics of the group. So because of the age range, young adults, college age, those people tend to be less religious because of the geographic origins, hometowns of most of these students coming from California or the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest for the most part. Those are all very secular areas, so that also makes sense with the secularization part. And high levels of education. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but education and secularity correlate. So these students are seeking a bachelor's degree, so already at a higher level of education and potentially going on to more. And more often than not, their parents are also well educated, so that makes sense. And they're overwhelmingly liberal. I asked a question about political affiliation and political views, just sort of leanings, and it's very, very liberal. Very few students identify as slightly conservative or very conservative. So yeah, and then the spirituality trend also comes through more with young adults, so that made sense with this population. And there was a lot more discussion, but for now I'll end there so that we can ask questions and discuss further. Yeah, thank you. And please get in touch if you want to chat about SSA or my thesis, or any and all of the above. I'd be happy to send you the link to the full thing if you want to check it out. Yeah. Yeah?
I was wondering if you just showed that you looked at political leaning, liberal versus conservative. Did you by any chance ask about party affiliation?
Yes, I did, and it was overwhelmingly Democratic Party. I think I asked, I'll have to check. I had two questions. So one was like party affiliation, and then one was, which party you would affiliate with, and then just general, like a spectrum of political views.
And did you ask about whether or not they're registered to vote?
No.
Because I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Oh, there's so many questions that after I did it, I was like, shoot, I really wish.
That's the future research part of it.
Right. I did throw one in there that I was just curious about. Do I identify as a feminist? And I think it was 87% identify as feminist. So go Claremont. Part of me is like, what the heck is the other 13% doing? But it's okay. We'll get there.
I think humanist means something better.
Right.
Than feminist, yeah.
Right. Which I guess, good intentions. Yeah. And there are a lot of other graphs I could pull up too. Yes?
Do you know any longitudinal data on how people change as they age?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is it just this particular generation that's very agnostic, or is it that people tend to become more religious as they grow older?
The older generations tend to be more religious, and depending on the research you're looking at, don't quote me on this, but I think it's a combination of the two. So people become slightly more conservative in their views, which means potentially slightly more religious as they age, but also older generations, when they were like 18 to 22, but are now the older generations, they were more religious as young people than young people are today. So it's like a little bit of both, and it's not, in some studies it seems clearer than others, but it's not drastic by any means. Yeah.
Okay, so what's your name?
Oh, yeah.
Just to piggyback, I did a little research on this, and from my understanding, is that even though like this generation is some of the most like secular, historically, people do have a tendency to drop out of religion significantly after the age of 18-ish or so. You can imagine that you go out of home, you go to college, start experimenting.
Yeah, going to college.
But usually, also the statistics show that there's a huge curve of people coming back strongly into religion around the age of 30, 33-ish. You want to guess why? Exactly, because people identify religion as a machine for values. So let's go back again to the message that I was saying at the beginning, that religion has owned this idea of values, leadership, charity, compassion, so on and so forth, because we let them. That's the reason why they come back, because they think, oh, church is going to help me raise good kids. And you don't offer a humanist alternative, well, that's going to keep happening.
So,
Amen.
Do you see a correlation between time of childbearing and time of increased religiosity?
Exactly. I have friends that they consider themselves agnostic, but they go to churches because they like the Sunday school, they like the trips, they like the social programs that the church offers. Camps, the Boy Scouts, all that.
Thank you everybody for coming. We have to wrap up so that the next presentation can get started, but I'm around and I'll be out there if you want to chat more or have any questions. Thank you.